Okay, hi everyone. This is November 30th, 2023. We're taking this week's Helm meeting after a week off for the Thanksgiving Indigenous Peoples Day holiday to do a retrospective on Helm 3. Here's the link. Oh, actually, it looks like Ian already passed the retro board. Here's the link to the notes, just in case you do want to put something on a note that doesn't easily fit in a retro board. And yeah, so Ian volunteered to lead the retro, so we can all be here and help as needed, but take it away.
Yeah. So general idea here is add your cards to the retro board, put your first name, last initial, so you can talk to your board, upvote the ones you think are most interesting, and we'll take it from there. So I could kind of share my screen. You can kind of see some of the stuff I've put on it. So yeah, we'll do one of each. We'll go what's well, what we're thinking about, what could be improved, and we'll just continue along as we do the retro. So you can kind of just drag them up there. These are some of the ones I've been thinking about. I don't want to dominate the board too much, so I'm not going to move all my items up right away.
This is great. I was planning on doing a Google Drawing, so this is fantastic. Do you recommend people log into this thing? Or
I think anonymous is fine. I logged into it, but if you can choose if you want to log in or not log in.
Oh, I had a card. That's my question. How do you actually add a card?
Oh, you should be able to add a card. You just start typing.
Where?
If you look at where I'm sharing, you can see you should have this private section.
Uh-huh.
And it has a card in it, so you just feel like this is a new card, and then you can drag it up.
Okay, cool. Yep.
And you should be able to upvote things by pressing this little button.
Mhm. And to be clear, the retro is about Helm version 3, not just the project lately, but Helm version 3, which has been out for many years now, and the goal is to have one or more, ideally probably more of these, and use that to help aid in our process toward Helm 4.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And for this retro too, probably a little bit more broadly too, just, certainly Helm 3, but like everything around that process too, right? Like, do you think PRs are going well? Do you feel like, what things are you thinking about in the future of what they could, what Helm could do? So. We'll give about a few more minutes here. Don't know if give everyone a chance to put their items on that they'd like to talk about. And definitely feel free to upvote ones that you want to discuss too. right. So we're at 10 after now. Everyone, yeah, I guess goes, if you got more, go ahead and continue to put them in, and we'll just we'll start moving forward. So let's start off with something that's going well. Wide usage and adopted by thousands of users by George. Do you want to talk to that one a little bit, George?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably what it says, but like we saw when we're preparing the KubeCon presentation, like a lot of people use Helm. It gets bazillions of downloads, and just gives me, I don't have any strong evidence, but it gives me the feeling that it generally just works for people. And I think maybe someone at Max card, all these people don't complain because it works. So
Yeah.
we don't really hear from them.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that adds a lot because of all these other items, right, that we have up here. So, I stacked those together. Didn't mean to do that. Cool. So let's go on to another one. Matt, you're thinking about three-way merge on CRs?
Yeah, so Kubernetes core manifests like deployments or jobs, we do a three-way merge on, but that wasn't available for custom resources when it came out. And so in the name of backwards compatibility, when we don't have that on there, but it's now available for custom resources. And that would be a very useful thing, especially when you got custom resources and just the way webhooks, mutating webhooks, things like that can affect things. This is just one of the things in my mind. Like, how do we bring that capability in and do it cleanly?
Does this come into play with the server-side apply stuff at all too? Would this affect that?
And I was thinking about server-side apply, and server-side apply gets interesting when you do things like dry runs and template and navigating three-way merge, server-side apply, dry runs, templating, and all of that is a nice chunk of work to look at, quite frankly.
Yeah, maybe I'll go ahead and jump to that one. Considering we're kind of on the topic of three-way merging things, and we'll jump over to George's as well. So George, you want to talk a little bit about what you're thinking about server-side apply?
Yeah, it's I think at least in the core, it's mostly a mechanical substitution of the existing functionality to using server-side apply. But then I think the more interesting thing about server-side apply is how do we utilize some of its features within Helm. And in particular, for example, server-side apply has what they like the field owner, and how we might use field ownership in Helm and how that might also affect how Helm operates. So there's actually that draft hip for server-side apply out there that I wrote, but happy to extend that when we think of other things.
Yeah, so mentioning with Matt mentioning the custom resources, I wonder if we should have a section on, or maybe you already do, maybe I should reread it again. Do we talk about custom resources at all in the server-side apply?
Yeah, in the sense that it should just work for custom resources.
Okay. Would it? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's jump to something that could be improved. Let's go to Scott. Stronger typing somehow.
Yeah, well, this is one that's been talked about a lot. It was talked about quite a bit in the design for Helm 3. Many of you probably remember the conversations about Lua.
Well, what do you mean by stronger typing? So let me ask that.
I mean, well, I'm not jumping to solutions, but I mean that the current way that Helm charts are constructed there's really no way to ensure that things are going to run properly when quote unquote compiled, you know, before rendering and after all the hooks and everything. So what I meant was mainly for configurations. I don't really know exactly, but I know I know that like what I meant was more like, could we use some kind of typed language possibly, at least as an option, or revisit that? Yeah.
So you're talking about like specifically type template languages, or more like typing the incoming values? Because I know there's like a schema for the incoming values that doesn't seem to be frequently used, but is there?
Yeah, there is.
So you're thinking more on the like a
Well,
language that allows the typing, a templating language.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're thinking of a different templating language besides Go template?
Yeah. Am I suggesting that we necessarily do that with Helm and V4? Not necessarily, but I think it's worth bringing up again as we're looking into the next major version.
Yeah. So I can give a little context on this that may just help folks. So Helm 2 had it actually had the ability to add other templating systems to it, not just Go template that was there. In fact, an interesting homage, the internal variable name inside of Helm was called Engine Yard, and Helm originally came out of Deis, which was part of Engine Yard. And so there was a nice little thing there because it was template engine. And that was there. And we did a call for people to add other templating systems besides Go TPL. And people said, yeah, we should do this or that. Nobody ever contributed or did anything with any other templating system ever. And we ultimately pulled the feature out of Helm v3 because it simplified the code and it was just never used. And in the time, with the calls and the conversations, couldn't get anybody. Everyone said Go TPL was sufficient. They complained about it a little bit, the things it didn't have, but nobody was willing to write another system or was interested in it, or working on it, or doing the integration. So it just never happened. And so ultimately, if we were going to bring something back, we'd probably need a good case in that kind of thing to do it, just because just saying you can do it is one thing, but nobody ever took us up on the offer. Nobody was interested. That's the history.
And since then, there have been other people that have made other packaging tools because in sometimes in large part, but other times just in part, because that was a specifically outside of the scope of Helm 3. And I wonder if some of those efforts couldn't potentially be consolidated. You know, Ben made a note in the chat about Timony. I should know that because Stefan wrote it, but using Q. And I know there have been some other attempts at using Q. Just wanted to bring it up in the retro.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I've often wondered if maybe that support was a little bit early, you know, that people were still kind of absorbing the idea, and that's why maybe they didn't adopt it. If I remember right, to actually use that, didn't you have to have like an extra binary or something that came along to actually support the templating language?
You did have to have something, and you know, to build it into Helm means that the Helm maintainers are going to support it and understand it, and it's going to be a templating system that's not a fly-by-night one, and is really going to be around for a while and used. And at this point, you also have to take into account the backwards compatibility story. So, you know, I'm all for doing other things. We just have to realize, you know, what we take on and all of that stuff. But in general, I was actually an advocate for it and try to encourage people to do some of the other things. It just didn't happen, and that kind of thing.
One thought I have on the stronger typing idea is a lot of the problems I think with Go template are because people have to implement a bunch of business logic inside of the template. I think it would be nice if, or nice, I thought at least is if you could move that business logic out of templating and into something else, like a pre-rendering stage of values that allow people to do their business processes with non-templates. Just to throw that out there, I think that fits in with what we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
we can jump over to another thinking about, which is your pre-rendering values,
Yeah.
which I think, yeah, it could help. And this is actually, I think this is really a duplicate of my one here, which is the reproducible value generation, and trying to like, I've kind of had this idea that wouldn't it be really nice if anything that wasn't 100% reproducible happened in like the very early phases, and it came in as a value, so that when the chart templating ran, you always knew it was going to produce the exact same output every time. So you'd have like generate values phase where you do cryptographic functions and you do random string generation, and maybe you do lookup functions, like all these things that generate values happen like up front. And then like the core chart running logic is always 100% reproducible, and you know it's going to generate, if you change this, it's going to generate, it's going to change the YAML on the other side. I'll go ahead and I'll hand that off to you, George, and see if that is kind of what you're thinking, or if this is
definitely along those lines. Just the general theme, I think, for Scott's stronger typing is that no one really likes writing a bunch of complicated Go template logic. And yeah, the more straightforward and simple that YAML production can be, I think happier users would be.
So what I hear is a new version of chart, so to speak, because we did chart version 1, then we did chart version 2. In order to accomplish this, it would be a chart version 3 with a new workflow in that. That's sort of what I'm hearing is the idea.
Yeah, or potentially you could start off with not constraining the system, like just providing the extra functionality to allow you to move your thing to do things in this earlier phase, and then deprecate doing it in the templates so that it's not such a hard switch over.
But that's talking about making a change, right? And so when you go to make that change, right, you're deprecating something, adding something else. So let's say you have Helm version 3 and Helm version 4 out at the same time for an overlapping period, right? So I construct a chart designed to use the new features. How does the older versions of Helm 3 deal with that chart in a reconstructed manner? You end up with some breaking changes there. And so that's the reason I see a new API version and support and things like that, because how do you not break existing charts and flows? And I'll tell you, as we went from API version 1 to 2, which was a bit clunky, in support of that, because we did it in the same pipeline, it's, supporting this stuff while maintaining backwards compatibility. So the older charts still run and get the output that people expect is not going to be easy to test and deal with if you restructure some of those things, right? So I'm just suggesting that how you do that and how you broadcast to people the new features. And if we're going to take something out, well, you need to bump the API version to take something out.
Yeah. I would hope that we could do so in a way that would like present new features, and then maybe the version bumps like when we take away the old features, but it may have to happen in one fell swoop too. I guess, you'd have to kind of flush that out in a design doc, exactly how you're going to attempt it. But I think the idea would be pretty solid to move.
So what would the experience be like for a Helm user who's just grabbing a chart and installing it? How would that change in the process? Would it? Or are we just talking about shifting around the internals?
I think it would only change for Helm developers. Helm users would still see it as the same, other than they could have some stronger guarantees around these were my values that went in, and this is what came out. So anything that wasn't like everything that runs in the templating phase doesn't change. It'll always produce the same output. So I think that visibility would users could see it, but otherwise it would be the same, at least how I'm imagining it.
I'd agree with Ian. This is just a way to make it easier for people to develop charts rather than affecting how users really consume them.
Yeah, and maybe a little less mental burden in that, you know, anything that changed happened in this phase. Like you don't have to worry about a template, you know, reproducing a string and changing your deployment set unexpectedly or something like that, right? You know everything that's going to happen right up front. So
yeah, I think it may. So we're talking about like within the Helm user profiles. What I'm hearing you talking about is the second profile, application distributor, primarily.
yes,
Yep.
that would be right.
I think that there's probably use case for the application operator too, like the end user who says Helm install whatever application, because there's debugging involved often. Hopefully
Yes.
not, right? Hopefully it installs and everything's fine, but you do a Helm upgrade or you do, you know, et cetera, and you may need to debug that. People do. So I think that's the other, both pro and con, I think, to using something different, because people both love and hate YAML with minimal templating. People usually hate YAML with a lot of Go templating. And people, for the most part, dump on, you know, on YAML a lot while almost everyone uses it because it's very human readable. So it wouldn't be a lighthearted suggestion, but I do think what Ian is saying about you know, changing some of the phases so that there's some less I guess less surprising and less mysterious ways that the values move through the different phases, given all of the different options and features that have been added over time. Using something that's more strongly typed could help that. You know, that's why languages like that exist, because it does help with debugging. It gives you a better sense of where you're at. You can have breakpoints even. You can, you know,
Yeah.
Have you know, oh, I don't know, VS Code extensions or whatever.
And
Yep.
not to mention that hopefully it will also reduce the complexity of that templating, to your point around people not liking complicated templating.
Yeah. One of the things I'd hope that would come out of this as well, if we were able to pull this off, is that it could be easier to add more generators, right? More helpful things that end users could eventually have to generate inputs into Helm. I'm struggling to come up with an example right now, but I know I've run into situations before. I'm like, oh, I wish I had something that would generate this particular thing, or actually even like random passwords, right? Right now, the fact that they're generated in the template means that if I rerun the template, that's going to get regenerated. And if it was in like a separate phase, I could have captured that random generated password and saved it as a value instead of it changing when I Helm apply again. Some stuff like that.
I'm going to put a link to something that relates to what, I mean, Matt went far back, which was great. And I'm going to put a link to when something similar was considered. This was inside of the HIPS. It's in the HIPS archive. So you don't see it when you just go to the front HIPS page. You have to like go through the archive and find it. And this has some of the proposal, the initial design proposal for Helm 3, at least once it got to a HIP, to have an embedded Lua engine and some event handlers. So just, not that I'm saying we should go back to that exactly. And in fact, I want to suggest that we move off of this topic pretty soon, just because there's probably other topics that are important, but I would think that no matter what happens, a HIP would be absolutely required, of course, for not only the major design proposal, but other things that relate to why each suggestion is made. And I would hope that we could give a dispassionate list of pros and cons. Yeah, with a thought toward the end users, like Matt was saying.
And feasibility, because some of the things that have been subtly mentioned in here with some of the tools we've talked about aren't actually feasible. And so we do need to look at the feasibility of some of these things. In fact, some of the things that I wanted to do in the past, when I started drilling down into the code, going all the way down to the lowest levels, I discovered that what you have out there are packages and tools that don't give you the ability to support some of the features we wanted. And so we'd have to build and maintain our own, and nobody had the time for that. And so looking at the feasibility of some of this is also part of it.
Cool.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
should definitely move on from this because we've taken a lot of time.
Yeah, it was a good. I think that's a good topic, though. So glad to spend some time on it. But yeah, I'll move on to. I'll do my own here. Actually, I'll put these two together. The bounded context and YAML in, YAML out. I think this is one of the great things about Helm is, for the most part, I produce a set of values and I get a bunch of YAML coming out. Super easy to kind of conceptualize, understand. I don't have to understand some new concept about, tenants, or, think about how CRDs are going to kind of flow through the system. Very easy to quickly grasp what something's doing and debug it. So I've always seen this as being like what I felt as being one of the biggest pros of using Helm in general. And to that, I think I would propose that should be like a guiding principle in some ways, is the more YAML in and YAML out it can be. I think the better in general for Helm. But that's probably a controversial take. But that's when I'm been the happiest with Helm, is when the charts kind of maintain that as closely as possible. So
and Ian, you, just to clarify, I feel like you're talking about the application operator user profile. I linked it again.
yes, yeah, that would be the I suppose I think this is almost in general all profiles really, seeing this, or at least like it'd be the operator and the chart developer profiles would both, I think, having this idea of you have YAML in one side and YAML out the other, or this bounded context of exactly what Helm's going to do. Very useful. So. All right, on to the next one here. Let's see. I won't pick another one of mine. Let's do Scott, more regular triage and PR review.
Oh, in the thinking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a follow-up from what's going well. I think, like, have we had hordes of triage maintainers? No, but do we have like almost a handful of really awesome people who are making this better through that proposal? Yeah. So I think part of that is, I mean, this may sound like a broken record, but just continuing on ultimately, but ramping up probably some events. When we've done that, it seems to have helped. We just don't have anything like that as like part of our planned strategy. It just happens to be when someone feels like taking it upon themselves to do it. So
Okay.
Thinking that might be best to do that so that it can scale a little bit better.
Okay. What's an action item maybe we can take out of that one? Like, should we just write up a doc or just set something on a calendar to?
I would like that. I'd like to know if anybody else would like to shadow one of those sessions and or jump right into helping get them started. Don't necessarily have to have hands up right now, but it sort of, to Matt's point about, I think you bringing up the word feasibility is just going to apply to all sorts of things across the board here. Is there interest? How many people in our team has that interest? is it just, we're glad when it happens, but yeah.
No, I think it's a great idea. Maybe let's set one up and just see how it goes. Let's do at least one, right? Or a couple, let's put a couple on a calendar and just see what's up. So yeah.
We've done a few. So I think, well, I guess what I'm mentioning is more like setting up something regular.
Oh, okay.
Whether it's once a month or once every 2 months. I mean, I'm whatever is something feasible. But I think doing that would ensure, and getting more people involved in setting those up than myself. I mean, I know everybody on the team is doing so much, and this might be an area where someone else, you know, maybe some of the existing triage maintainers might want to help. Yeah, grow it through some regular meetup, almost like a regular bug scrub that some projects have. I think just a regular onboarding would help us get to the point where we could even imagine that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, let's try it out. I say, let's do it. So I'm willing to help if you need some help setting it up or whatever. So
awesome.
Public roadmap. Andy, what's your thoughts there on a public roadmap?
Right now, there's a lot of questions of, is Helm dead? What's going on with Helm? It'd be good to just kind of provide a viewpoint from a public perspective of where the project's going, what we're thinking about, where we are, what we know we need to do better. If we know something sucks, if something may suck, we can at least say, hey, we're gonna work towards it. But it also but the best part about it is it gives people an idea about how they might be able to contribute versus oh, everything's fine. If you have someone that, I'm just gonna use my example, that loves signing content. Okay, maybe they want to go ahead and put a POC together, or maybe there's some documentation of the existing signing mechanism. Just something that makes it easier for outside contributors to kind of latch on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I think that actually fits right into with my topic on guiding principles. A public roadmap helps set, is maybe a very strong declaration of kind of guiding principles of where we want to go. So I think that's great. I mean, the guiding principles are probably a little bit more like high level, what I was thinking about, right? Like we want it to be more reproducible. We want Helm to be more testable, like these like very kind of grand, abstract concepts. But the public roadmap would probably be like an instantiation of that, right? Like we want to do this. This is the thing we want to do to meet those principles. Does that sound about right?
Yep, exactly.
Cool. So what can we do to get that done? Should we
This meeting is partly leading us there.
Yeah.
Basically, what this has been iterated or reiterated a number of times, the need for it. Matt Farina has mentioned this a number of times whenever the conversation about is there going to be another major version of Helm came up. The answer is always, well, is there a roadmap? Because you need one. And so I don't think this is really describing the value of a roadmap for software in general. It's just you simply need one for if you want a successful project. And what would we sorry, I think maybe I'm saying something obvious, but just what do we need to do is your question. Have more meetings like this and put that together. Right now we have them in issues. I was asked to put together, or I volunteered to put together some process stuff, which I started. We've used GitHub projects successfully in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's maybe the beginning of a public roadmap is GitHub projects board with some things in it that we think that could be a beginning of it. along with, trying to set some of these guiding principles of, if you're PR, and I guess what I was thinking of there is like, I do see a lot of people making PRs, putting real work into things. And when I look at them, I go, I don't really know if that meets where Helm wants to go. And maybe, maybe that's wrong. Maybe that is where Helm wants to go. But I think as maintainers, we should help guide people there so that they know what's likely to be accepted or not, because that's like where we're wanting to go.
Yeah, we need design collaboration meetings.
Yeah.
And
So
also-
maybe we can, one of these dev calls, we can sit down and work on roadmap and guiding principles and just see where we get. Maybe that's what we do. Okay, cool. Let's see what else. Let's have releases are cut on a regular defendable schedule. Who put that one down? Doesn't have a name on it, so I won't spend too long. Okay. Lots of users who mostly don't have negative feedback. I think, Matt, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. I mean, we do get feedback and we do get questions, but compared to the number of users we have, we've got tons of users who mostly don't come around complaining and whining, which means generally they're finding Helm to be useful.
Yeah, it definitely, and it's so pervasive throughout the ecosystem, right? It's just become like, of course, using Helm. So to have, you know, I guess mostly happy users, certainly everyone, there's new things to be done and enhanced, but yeah, it is definitely a good sentiment. So let's jump to, okay, we'll do one of mine here under thinking. This is a very broad one, so I better time box it because I know probably a lot of people could have a lot of thoughts, and I have a lot of thoughts here. And that's WASM and its possibilities around Helm. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities when I think about the sandboxing capabilities in WASM for Helm to adopt things here. I almost wonder, some of my more fantastical ideas, I wonder if it stops being Helm in some ways, right? Like the contract, it ends up looking a lot like Helm, but maybe it's a totally separate project that's like a Helm X or something like that. Like I've even thought, like, what if a Helm chart is a WASM module, right? I've heard other things bounced around about, like, what if we attach a WASM module for a templating engine? I'm sure there's other probably thoughts on things that where WASM could fit into the Helm ecosystem. So I'll open that up for some discussion.
My take is, if we were going to introduce additional ways of doing templating, then WASM somehow, whichever way it does, would be the direction to look at, as it's got a stronger security model than other executables. But and I guess that's kind of the salient feature of why we'd be discussing WASM, I presume, is because of the security features that it provides.
Yeah, I think so. The fact that it can let you write things in multiple languages and can run things kind of safely in a sandbox, I think it makes it very attractive for kind of a lot of the use cases around Helm. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how it shakes out, right? Like, I think something like adding templating maybe wouldn't be something entirely different from Helm, but maybe if I say, hey, I'm just going to make WASM modules be a Helm chart, maybe that's like a whole nother experimental thing where we try it and kind of see what people think about it. And I don't even know if it's a next iteration of Helm if you go that far, or if it's just a Helm's spiritual successor at that point or something like that, right? So I even think, like, when I start thinking about that kind of thing too, I start to think, well, you could almost start having entry points for creating a framework that is more consumable for operators, like life cycle entry points and stuff like that. So this is definitely a 1,000-foot view kind of possibilities when I start thinking about it. So
Yeah, and I think some of this gets into who are the users and what solution are you trying to solve. I know early on in Helm, people talked about, well, maybe you have a bunch of tools and then you chain them together and you do all these different things. And then it becomes, well, how does this kind of end user solve this problem, right? And it becomes, oh, well, we didn't even think about that guy. Actually thinking about who we're solving problems for and building that, and then what technology can help enable that, I think is a good way to look at it. I think WASM definitely fits in there, but just saying, well, it becomes a successor, and then you've got all these other bits and parts. Well, what's the solution and who uses it, right? Like if I go into a Linux system, I can, I can do shell scripts. I can do all these things to move things around in my file system. But to go take a package manager and install something, it grabs the binary, puts it in the right place, sets up your configuration. If it needs some piece of data from you, it can ask you or it can be passed in. It takes all these things and wraps them together in a really useful, elegant solution that deals with distribution and all that stuff, right? If you had to go do that all on your own, it becomes complex. Like, how do I grab something and then verify what I got, right? Verifying the signature or the checksum. Those, how do you turn all that into just an easy to use solution? And that's more or less a lot of what Helm is. You can have other tools that do bit parts, but then it's hard to use for certain audiences, right? And so how do you construct a solution, I think is the big win here. And digging into what technologies make those solutions is the thing.
yep, agree. Cool. Let's
So I
just do
mean,
it.
Scott
Go
asked
ahead.
a question in here. What is the scope of Helm as a project in terms of problems it intends to solve? I mean, Helm is a package manager. It is meant to make installing applications in Kubernetes easy, right? The same way a package manager does for a Linux operating system or Windows or Mac. You've got a package, an application, a thing you need to install. How do you make that straightforward and simple? It was originally envisioned before, when Diaz was writing a PAS, right? And then how do I get a database alongside that? How do I get these other things? And that story still rings true of how do you take these applications and make them easy to install places? Because to install and run an application, you need to know the platform you're installing it on and the business logic and everything for the application, right? Now, most people, especially developers and people who need to install and work things, they're not going to become experts in every one of their dependencies. I don't know how many times I've installed Postgres or MySQL or Maria on a Linux system. I'm not an expert in it, but I can install it. I can do all kinds of SQL against it, but I'm definitely not an expert in configuring it, placing it on the system, nor am I an expert in all these other things. And that's often what it is. You have to know how do I auto scale this, right? What are the right ways and settings? What memory do I need to give to what? There's a lot involved in installing and running something in Kubernetes. And most people are not going to go figure that out, but you can bundle that up. Somebody who does know that can bundle it up. And then a whole lot of people who don't know that can install it and use that business logic and knowledge in an easy to use manner. And that's what a package manager does and what a package manager for Kubernetes does. It takes that business knowledge, that expertise that everybody can't get, it encapsulates it in a package that other people can install and use. And that's ultimately what Helm does, is make that knowledge reusable. So other people can run the packages, can run those applications in a manner that is accessible and approachable to them without having to become experts.
Yeah, and specifically for the Kube API, right? Because
yeah, and specifically for Kubernetes, It's specifically
because there are other things people do in Kubernetes, like different kinds of state stores and other types of things that, Helm doesn't try to package that, nor does it try to actually package any binaries of applications. That's all should be within, at least within how Kubernetes is set up now, within containers. So I just wanted to just put a tiny bit more clarification on that. The what is Helm on the website is really great. And if there's a question about whether that should change, then I think that would be something to discuss as part of a, like, should we widen the scope of Helm or something like that? But otherwise, I think it pretty much covers it. So maybe just give those things a read and see if
Yep.
anyone thinks it doesn't.
All right, well, let's jump to this one. Additional signing and verification options. Andy?
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about provenance and secure software supply chain, and Helm is certainly a key member of that. Right now, we do support very, very archaic methods of signing and verifying using GPG. I'm sorry, Matt, you and I have talked about this.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree.
There are other tools out there. I'll name two of them offhand, Sigstore and Notary. Certainly we can look at supporting other ones as well as, like, there's a couple of new ones that Docker just came out with too. Just saying how we can expand, very much like templating, expand the options available for end users. So it's very much the same type of mechanism. So if we're looking at adding in new templating mechanisms, we should think about also signing mechanisms in that same vein.
Cool. Is this one that we need a HIP for to spin up, or do we think that this is pretty? I mean, this sounds like maybe it could just be
I
a
think
PR.
we already have a HIP on
Oh,
this.
do we? For adding Sigstore?
I didn't say Sigstore. I said signing mechanism. I like
Yeah,
Sigstore, but once again, there are other players out there. I want to make sure we leave all options open.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't read that HIP, so I'd have to go have a look, see. I guess what the
I know there was at
discussion on
least
this
one
is.
issue. I'm trying to remember if the end user ended up creating a HIP, but I will put it into the channel if I can find it.
I created a similar card here, and one thing I've encountered as a user of Helm is it's very, like, you can take a Helm chart and the Helm chart is floating around the actual software which is deployed into your cluster. So it's very hard to know what, like, you can't just look at a Helm chart and because the Go templating language is Turing complete, you can't actually be fully confident that you're actually installing a particular version of an application within a Kubernetes cluster. So that's kind of what I mean by images as first class objects within a chart. Is like, it's very similar that when as a user you're deploying a chart, you can have full confidence that the actual images that have been deployed by that chart are what are what you think they are. I don't know if that matches what you've seen from other use cases that you've seen, Andy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like right now, when it comes like to images, there's no good way to track the images that you have but the canonical way right now is through the artifact hub annotation is the way I've done it more recently. And I think there's at least one or two issues that had brought up the way to define a set of standardized, like, annotations or metadata, so you can easily call that out. Now that we have annotation support across the board, we should look at maybe defining some type of structure around that. I know, like, tools like Zarf make it easy for you to take a Helm chart and to make it available in disconnected environments. That's the number one use case I see for providing understanding of what images are available. Obviously, it gets more complicated because Helm, it's a templating language, so it could change depending on what you want to use as the source of truth for the images, but at least providing the out-of-the-box way to see with the images that are provided.
Yeah, there's also potentially prior art we could use from the Carvel tooling there too. They have a lot of stuff around managing lists of images and carrying them around from place to place.
Yeah. I linked to what I think the HIP that you're talking about, Andy, is the annotations for images used by Helm charts. That's the one that you and me and Tom Runyon
Yep.
from from the DoD put together.
Yes,
'Cause there
that was the one. I'm looking for the other one that was around signing mechanisms.
yeah, I wasn't able to find that. That's
Okay, so it must never got into a hip. I can somebody, I'll do it later, I guess, create an issue for me to create that hip, and I'll write one up.
sure. I can do that right now in the community repo.
Yep.
Let's jump to, let's see. Simplifying, improving the code base for SDK usage, George.
Maybe I was at least thinking about SDK users when I wrote this, but my take is with the current code base, like when people wanted to use Helm as an SDK, the CLI portions were kind of lifted and shifted into being SDK portions, and things like the configuration of config locations, and there's all sorts of things which kind of make the code base more suited for a CLI tool rather than a SDK, I think. And I do think there's some scope to refactor the code base to make it more general purpose as an SDK and separate some of the CLI portions. Logging would be another thing that comes to mind.
Mhm.
I agree with this one. It's one of the things that I was going to put down until I saw it was already up there. So the SDK definitely needs updates for just an improved uses. As I've been an SDK user a lot the last few years, and even when this was all done, I mean, the SDK was take it over there and make an SDK that people can use, and we'll see what happens. Now we've seen a lot. We've seen the rough edges. We now know a lot of places where things can be cleaned up and we can make a better SDK.
Cool. I might just grab this next one of mine, which is because we've talked about this a few times, which is, and we're talking about making another one, which is the HIP process is pretty slow right now. And I do think that probably discourages people from some, like when they look at the hips that are out there and how long they're sitting, from probably making new ones. I don't really know what the solution to this is, but I thought I would bring it up. I think the core issue is people just don't have enough time to review and keep up with this stuff. But you know, probably like a full-time Helm maintainer would be something that would really help here. But obviously there aren't any. So
Could this be one, I hate to say it, but one like the community maintainer? You know, like someone like I'm blanking on her name. Help me.
Karen?
Karen, thank you. It can at least provide the triage for that and can then loop in other folks. Because since it does live in that community repo, I thought it might be a good overlap of you know, she does a lot. She does a lot. But it's more of a could be something that she can at least be the first person to get eyes on it and then loop in others.
Yeah, this came up in the past. I remember, oh man, I don't know if anybody remembers, Matt, if you remember when this was, but it was kind of a while ago when well, I came to the HIP process after people like Matt and other folks. So when I started digging into it, I realized that almost all of them are in drafts, even the ones that we are effectively treating as accepted. So we at one point built that into our meeting template, our weekly meeting template, but I'm not really sure where that went because I don't see it in there anymore. But to bring up HIPs, to like just reviewing them as a group.
yeah, maybe it'd be good to do a HIP review where we at least like we either close out ones that aren't getting accepted or just kind of clear off the board with like, you know, update all of them with this is where they're at or something, because there's a lot of them that haven't been updated in like years and it's like they seem pretty reasonable.
Well,
And
so for the number of hips, they do need to. A part of this is a lack of maintainers going through this. A lot of this comes back to the maintainer problem. of we are running on fewer maintainers than we had when the process was put together, and cleaning up the maintainer section and getting more onboarded is just one of those things. And it's all complicated by a market that's seeing a downturn. And so you see a significant divestment of people contributing to upstream CNCF projects across the board. So even though we have more projects, the overall investment in contributing to it is only like 2/3 in total what it was 4 years ago. And we've probably got twice as many CNCF projects now. Some projects are seeing 1/3 of the contribution level of some of the larger projects that they did just a few years ago. And part of that's maturity, part of that is just industry dynamic. There's a lot of reasons for it, but things move slower. And yeah, we do need to go clean all of that up. Absolutely true. And probably update the processes to make them a little bit more agile. But this is just a problem hitting everybody. And if we want to do more, we either need to slim things down or be more agile. Those are kind of our options right now.
Exactly. Yeah. I would just say that I don't think this points to a giant flaw within Helm's processes. It's just that we've been able to move ahead with the hit still in draft, officially in draft. And it just is one of the things that hasn't quite been cleaned up.
And yeah, even things probably maybe like even like assigning numbers and things like that could help with some of this stuff, right? Just to know that like, oh, it's like official enough that it's gotten a number now. We are at the top of the hour now. So this has been great. Yeah, I got to drop too. It sounds like everyone's pretty much has to drop. I'll export this board, throw it in chat, and if there's some items I think there's still a lot of great items on this board. Maybe we can discuss them offline. So this has been fun. We should probably do it again, maybe once a quarter or something. So thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.